Welcome to Born on the Bayou Sports, a Houston sports show made for Houstonians by Houstonians. Join Tim Costello and Scott Barzilla every week as they break down the latest in Houston Astros, Rockets, and Texans news. Tim's a former minor league broadcaster, and Scott has written 2 books on the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah, if Javier could get it figured out, it would make things a lot easier because he was that guy everybody was counting on this year to be a Cy Young candidate, take that big step forward and help anchor this rotation with Fromber.
Since he's come to Houston, you can look at the development of guys like Carlos Correa defensively, Jeremy Pena defensively. I mean, you can know Alex Bregman's, certainly I think a better than average third baseman.
And now you're putting teams in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. Now here comes Will Anderson. Pin back your ears, let's go.
So if you're Bayou born and bred, or just like spending time in the H, sit down, relax, and stay Houston strong. Welcome all my friends to the show that sometimes ends, Born on the Bayou Sports. Tim Costello, Scott Barzilla, coming to you on a wonderful Tuesday night here in Texas. I'm in the Colony. Scott back home in Houston. Scott, how are you doing tonight? I said sometimes ends. I think that's a great point. That's why we can continue to make parts. It's part 1, part 2, part 3. I feel like you answered your own question there, Scott. Because it is a never-ending story, it continues to come out in parts. Otherwise, when you go to Blockbuster and ask for never-ending story, they don't know which one you want. Yeah, it's based on the fact that this is English. That is. There's definitions to words, man. You gotta stay with it, and you gotta go with what words mean. Otherwise, this whole thing that we're doing doesn't make any sense, right? The spoken word means nothing if we don't go by what words mean. Speaking of what words mean, because I'm gonna use this to transition. We're gonna talk a little bit of draft first, but I had. The GM of one of the teams I worked for used to talk about the fact that the NFL doesn't have a combine, it has a combine. And he was very specific that you had to pronounce it that way because like a combine was like an engine or some kind of part for like a gear thing, and a combine is when everybody combines together to work out. And so he was always very adamant that you had to use the right word there. I am not. He was adamant. I'm telling you, I have never seen someone wanting to go down harder for his thought. But let's get our thoughts, Scott, on the NFL draft, because I think you and I were. I'm perplexed is definitely one thing, and I think we were maybe a little bit disappointed and the lack of movement in that first round. I think coming into it, you both and I thought there would be a lot of trades, guys coming up to get quarterbacks. And while there were a lot of quarterbacks taken, they kind of just all fell in order to the teams who needed them. And it was maybe a little, I don't know, a little ho-hum first round. Yeah, and I kind of agreed with you. I think Bo Nix is a little bit of a reach. Now, take it with a grain of salt. Sean Payton and the Broncos staff has come out and said, Nix was their guy the whole time. They were targeting him. They were, ran to the podium to take him kind of pick. I don't know if that's true or if that's kind of like, let's amp our guy up. Maybe he wasn't our first choice, but this is where we are and this is our quarterback and let's make him feel like home. Probably a little bit of both, right? Like if you didn't like him, you wouldn't have taken him there because you are linked to the quarterback that you get in order to keep your job in this game. So if you don't have a good quarterback, you're most likely going to get fired. So obviously they thought something of him, but yeah, it was interesting to see him go as high as he did, especially because you and I were talking about teams possibly trading back in late in the first round to get a quarterback, or even a team like Seattle having a chance to get Penix. And this thing just rolled out to where, the Raiders kind of probably thought they were in a position to maybe take a guy like Penix if they wanted to, or to get if they wanted Nick, they could have rolled the dice there. And that's just, they never got that opportunity. I agree with you. I like the Bowers pick. I think he was obviously one of the best players in the draft. I think if you're just going by talent-wise. And at the end of the day, when you have an opportunity to get somebody who maybe is, a top 5 or top 6 talent at 15, then yeah, you make the pick and you do it happily. The Raiders are in a position. Gardner Minshew can win games in this league. He won 9 or 10 games last year with the Colts. So you can be an average team with Minshew. You can have a really good defense and you can compete for a wild card in the AFC and maybe see what happens next year. But yeah, man, I'll let you go first on the Falcons because I heard a reasoning on it yesterday, that really opened my eyes to it, and I'm a little bit more neutral to almost even net positive on it after hearing that. But I'll let you kind of go first on Penix to the Falcons. I'm with you exactly, right? I think they can get out of that Cousins contract after 2 years with some penalty, and I think they can definitely do it after 3. And, it was a breakdown by Dan Orlovsky where you look at this Falcons team, they were basically a quarterback away, right? Like, they had a pretty good defense. They've got good wide receivers. They've got a good tight end. They've got 2 good running backs, one of which is Bijan Robinson, who you can do a lot of different things with. So now you get a quarterback, but he's older, right? He is older. So what happens, when that quarterback gets hurt again, or when that quarterback is done? And I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought as Hunter Brown is struggling again here. But no, it's what happens when that quarterback is 36 years old and does have to retire, or something happens. You don't want to have to go through this process again and go through quarterback limbo. If you have a guy that you can cost control for at that point 2 or 3 years, who then at that also, he's not going to be as expensive on that second contract, right? Like, this does kind of screw Penix a little bit, as he's not going to get the huge quarterback payday most likely that guys get on that second contract. But that helps the Falcons, right? Now they can control costs a little bit more, spread some of that money out, because you're going to have a guy like Bijan that's going to need to get paid. You've got Drake London who's going to want to get paid. You've got guys on the defensive side of things that are going to want to get paid. So yeah, it's going to be interesting down the line. It's going to be, Cousins isn't a guy who likes to mentor guys, right? I think he's shown that before. Like, I'm not here to teach you how to take my job. Like, I see you as my backup. You'll get the reps that I give you. And when you got a guy like Penix, who has been the guy everywhere he's gone, he's gotten a lot of reps everywhere he's gone, he's going to need some of those reps too if he wants to get better and be able at some point to take this team over. So I know if I'm Kirk Cousins and I just got signed to that big money and I realize the only way I'm going to get weapons is probably through the draft, maybe I'm a little bit disappointed right now because, again, I'm being paid a lot of money, and I expect my team to go out and get weapons to the draft because they can't really afford to go pay weapons. So we'll see what happens there, team chemistry-wise. But thinking longevity-wise, if you think you're going to be a good competitive team for the next 5-6 years, and your quarterback's 34 years old coming off an Achilles injury, yeah, it's probably not the worst idea to think long-term. Not far behind what C.J. Stroud did, really, right? Like, he just turned it over a little more. Yeah, Kirk Cousins he's a good quarterback, right? But he's not Tom Brady getting pissed that you didn't go get him another weapon, right? The only reason he should be pissed is because you paid him an amount of money that you pay franchise quarterbacks, right? So he feels like, hey, I'm going to be a guy in this city. Why would you go get another guy? And I understand that maybe with the first round pick, right? Like I would have liked a weapon there if I'm the quarterback. Go get me somebody who could help me live up to the contract that you signed me for. But any GM is going to be thinking about their job as well, and they're going to be thinking about a backup plan, and they're going to be thinking about the future, and that's all that is thinking about the future. But speaking of GMs, ours did a job, right? The way we talked about the way the first round went, and at the end of the day, that first round went perfect for the Houston Texans, who had a plethora of later round picks, and they said earlier in the process they were willing to trade out of the first round because they saw, a situation with first round defensive talent being available later in the draft. And that sure as hell happened, Scott. When you look at, the tackle and the cornerback that the Texans were able to get in the second round, those were great picks that I think are really going to help the depth and possibly with Lassiter in the corner, I think he could start. Absolutely. He's going to compete for playing time. And as you said, that's what you want for that pick. And when you look at the stats that he had in college, right, this guy was a lockdown. He did not allow a single touchdown on the entire season. He's got fantastic hips. He can play the slot. He can play outside. Maybe a touch undersized, but I think he'll put on some muscle with an NFL conditioning program. And once Brian Cushing gets his magic working into him, I really liked the third round pick as well, Scott, the safety out of USC, a guy who has fantastic ball skills, kind of plays, if all things go as perfectly as they could, an Ed Reed type center field out there. Is he a great tackler against the run? No. But you know what? Petrie is, and Petrie's not exactly fantastic in coverage. So the idea that maybe you could bring Petrie down into the box and some of your nickel or dime sets a little bit more, and then you've got a more of a pure free safety out there and let Ward do his thing. All of a sudden, this secondary where you and I were kind of after free agency wondering why, there were some holes. Are we going to get somebody else? Are we going to get another corner? Are we going to get another safety? Simmons is still out there. Now all of a sudden, this secondary has a chance to be flying around and make some plays for this defense, especially when you consider the pressure theoretically that we're going to get on the defensive line with Hunter and Autry and Will Anderson Jr. I mean, they're going to be bringing the heat. Scott, are you still with us? Nope. Go ahead. Yep. And again, let's remember too, the Texans don't spend a lot of time in their base package, right? They spend a lot of time in like a 4-2-5, and they keep a lot of defensive backs on the field. This is not a team who's made a lot of interceptions in their history, right? We've never really had a huge interception season for a guy. Stingley was, 4 or 5 last year, but we've, as a team, forced turnovers, but it's just never really been like we've got guys who just go ball hawk. You thought Ed Reed was going to be that guy when you brought him over here, and I ran out and bought his fucking jersey like an idiot. But at the end of the day, that's what this team needs. You need something in Patrick Mahomes' mind to say, I just can't let it rip deep. Because you know what? He just got a new speedster. Mahomes has a new weapon. So if you want to counter and try and go to the Super Bowl, you've got to get through Kansas City. Last year, we could get beat over the top. Petrie could get baited. And there were big plays to be had against the Texans defense. If you could find a way to pass block well enough, you could take a deep shot. Well, now it's not as easy to do so. Yes. Yeah, you and I have talked before. I'm a big fan of getting your quarterback one of his favorite college targets again, right? It's worked out for guys like Joe Burrow to get them back and be able to play together again. And also, we have one legitimate good running back, right? We got a late round pick. We didn't do a ton, but now you can run, 0 back sets with 2 tight ends, and you can run Tank Dell and Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. Those are your 5 pass catchers with C.J. Stroud. Stop that. Try and fucking stop that at the end of the day, right? Because somebody's gonna get open, and with the way that this offense runs with wide receiver end arounds or pitch play, whatever you want to call it, where you get the receiver coming into the backfield. You don't always have to have a running back on the field to be able to, run a play like that. You can have those Deebo Samuels kind of end around plays with Tank Dell or Nico Collins or Stephon Diggs coming through and gaining yards that way. So you're going to have 2 tight ends on the field and speed all over the place. And you could run, 5 wide or 5 pass catchers per se and give a running back a break. So the versatility aspect of it, I absolutely love. I'm a big fan of most of what we did. The offensive tackle, I originally thought there was a chance we could slide him inside as a guard, as a protection against Kenyon Green, but it looks like the Texans are pretty gung-ho on keeping him as a tackle. I wonder if maybe there's a chance they continue the Titus Howard at left guard experiment and move him to tackle because like I still think that is a hole, Scott. I still think Kenyon Green isn't the answer there. We'll see. He didn't play a snap last year. Who knows what could happen this year. But man, I am as amped for a Texans football season as I've been in a long time. Coming off of what we did last year, coming off of Jesus. The bullpen woes continue for your Astros, but coming off of what the team did last year and having positions of need met really through free agency because guys wanted to come here, and then being able to fill some depth holes and be able to address some future concerns for this team through the draft was really, really a nice thing to see. I would agree with you on that for the most part. I think they're in a better position running back wise overall than it looks right now. If Mixon goes down, we're running back by committee, right? Stroud's going to have to throw the ball more realistically. Pierce is going to bang in between the tackles, and most likely the rookie's going to be your scat back, stretch it wide, passes, stuff like that. One of the things I do like to try and remind myself, remember, is also the odds are there's going to be some bodies released, some maybe some older running backs or useful players released towards the end of training camp that could be fits to come in and help to do exactly what you're talking about, right, Scott? Like the camp casualties will happen, and so I do expect that the Texans to just kind of continue to be active on that waiver wire, whether it be a June cut or a post camp cut. I could very well see them supplementing Pierce or realistically getting rid of Pierce altogether and bringing in somebody else who gets cut and just is a better back. Someone who's maybe 34, 35, has some meat left on the bone, but just isn't a starter anymore. For example, like a Latavius Murray, right? At the end of the day, like that guy's a pretty solid backup running back. If you need him to start a game, he can still run for 60, 70 yards and a touchdown if you block well for him. Guys like that are going to become available. So I do think that, we have some cap space to bring somebody like that in should the situation arise. If the rookie is balling out in training camp and in preseason, then maybe you don't need to go that way. If not, hey, let's grab a veteran. I would agree with you on that, Scott. Especially, it doesn't count against the cap. They're the contracts aren't guaranteed, right? So why not take some shots on some guys who may be able to contribute? And the Texans do have that extra preseason game this year with the Hall of Fame game. So there's no reason why, C.J. Stroud's not playing that game, right? That's going to be the Davis Mills game. They signed a couple twins out of like South Dakota State, a couple receivers. That'll be interesting. Trick play possibilities are endless there, Scott, if you've got literal twins on the field. Frickin' Jake Myers. Okay. But if you've got two twins, can you imagine the trick plays that you could run if you've got like identical people out there? A little jersey swap, no one would ever know. I mean, it could get real crazy out there. I mean, I feel like it's an obvious answer because of they're the number one pick of the draft, but I really like the whole Chicago Bears draft in general, right? The way things fell, they were able to address a lot of areas of need. And then if you're a rookie quarterback coming into the league, look at the weapons that this guy has to work with, right? DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and then also Rome Aduze from Washington, right? So at the end of the day, like you've got Cole Kmet at tight end. You've got a good running game up there. You just signed Swift. So I love what the Bears did to give Caleb Williams a chance to win early. I really, really like that. I think the Minnesota did pretty well, right? If they believe that J.J. McCarthy is their quarterback, then you feel good about the draft overall, right? Like I wasn't as high on him personally, but the guy's a winner, right? The guy's won everywhere he's been, and that does account for something. But I just when I looked at the overall skills, I just think some of the other quarterbacks were better. But I really like what Chicago did, and I think Minnesota, if you do believe in McCarthy as a prospect, then I think then you're pretty happy with the Vikings draft. What about you, Scott? Yeah. I saw that it had something to do with his Netflix reality show that he did when he was in high school. Which, if that's the case, that's ridiculous. But also, this is the NFL, and they look at everything. And if word gets out, right, they start docking you, right? Like no one attend his birthday party, kind of thing, right? Why wasn't anybody at your birthday party? Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. The only thing I'd add in is this is just typical of the NFL, right? Where there's an opportunity to ask a good question of this. Like, hey, you were on this show. What did you learn from it? What did you learn from your experience of having your life broadcast for everybody to see? And what would you do differently if it was asked of again? And instead, they just analyze his appearance on it and be like, negative. So that's typical of the NFL, right? Like they've literally asked prospects before, like, was your mom a prostitute? Like that is something that the Dolphins have done. And so that doesn't shock me. I love the idea of taking him. I just don't know if the Saints have the quarterback coaching to bring him along, right? Like I thought if he would have went to Denver and they took two quarterbacks, one early, one late kind of thing, right? Like that would have been an interesting pick to let someone like Sean Payton work with him a little bit. But I just don't know. Like Dennis Allen is not exactly an offensive minded coach. Derek Carr hasn't been great there. The offensive numbers haven't been great there since Sean Payton left New Orleans. So I just question, was that the right team to develop him? Like, pardon me. Obviously, you need a plan for post Carr. Like he is an older quarterback. How long does he have left? I don't know. I love the idea of taking a risk on a guy in the 5th round that had a lot of upside that just didn't pan out in college, and hoping that someone like David Carr could mentor him. But you need the quarterback coach or the offensive coordinator who can bring that guy along as well, and I just don't know if New Orleans has that. I think the Bills, right? Like just looking at the first round alone, you traded back out of the first round with a team that consistently knocks you out of the playoffs so they could go get the one thing that their roster was missing, a speedster, right? Like even if you feel like you got your guy in Keon Coleman in the second round and he's the one that you want and all this other stuff, like you still allowed another team that you you literally cannot beat in the playoffs to get better, and you gave them the opportunity to do that. I think it's hard to look at any other team, beyond that, in my opinion, at least. Oh, I'm not either. Cowboys are in trouble. Cowboys are absolutely in trouble. They're setting themselves up for some dark ages. I feel like they had some after Troy Aikman, right? Like Cowboys, do people not remember crackhead Quincy Carter? Like, he was not a good NFL player, but this guy was getting starts. You literally had to go hire Bill Parcells out of retirement to rebuild your entire organization because you were such a fucking dumpster fire. And you got lucky as shit with Tony Romo, right? An undrafted guy who becomes your franchise quarterback. Then you get lucky again with Dak Prescott in the 4th round. Do you think that's just going to happen again? Do you think you're just going to, like, luck into quarterbacks? No, that's not how this works. Look at the Colts, right? The Colts got lucky as shit. Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck. You know what? There's some dark ages after that. I think we're really about to see the cracks in the facade here for the Dallas Cowboys because they told everybody they were all in this offseason, right? Let's not forget, like, to preface all of this ineptitude before the offseason, they fucking come out and say we are all in after getting their asses kicked in the playoffs. They got a fucking ass handed to them. Then they come out, they do absolutely nothing in free agency, go into the draft, do exactly what you said. Then after the draft, they went and signed Zeke Elliott, which, like, I don't even mind that, but you're right. His stats have gone down every year. And then on top of it, if you look at, like, when he actually was good, the Cowboys had the best offensive line in the league, and it wasn't even close. Like, you and I could have run for 4 yards of carry behind that fucking offensive line. So he was a young, fresh 22-year-old with the best offensive line in the NFL. Like, yeah, he had some good years. But, like, he had a shit ton of carries early on in his career, and now here we are. He's an older running back on worn-down legs, and now you're asking him to once again be the bell cow for your offense. I mean, I think Dak's going to throw it all around the yard. I think Dak's going to throw the ball more than he's ever thrown in his career. I don't think the Cowboys are going to run the ball very much this year. I really don't. That is true. They're going to go the two-headed monster. Yeah, I mean that, and then on top of it, the draft grades that come out immediately, right? Like, the draft has barely ended, and we're grading everybody's pick. Like, I get it, there's a need for content, but at the end of the day, like, it's kind of tough to grade a draft before anybody has played a single fucking snap in the NFL. Like, what are you grading? You're grading who you, like, how you think. Like, people hated on the Texans draft last year. People gave us an F for that draft. And you know what? That draft turned the whole fucking franchise around. That draft, going and getting Will Anderson Jr. on top of CJ Stroud and getting Tank Dell, that draft changed the fortune of the Houston Texans, and we got an F from people. So it's just content. Like, ESPN never should have got away from what they were, which was like the CNN of sports. We don't need the Fox News of sports. I don't need you to fill hours and hours of end of bullshit content. I was happier when you ran SportsCenter from like 6 a.m. till noon. Run that same shit over and over again. It's better than these morning shows because then you have to have people like Mel Kiper who should never have a job. Like, this guy, in an age where you need to look good to keep your job on television, he looks like the fucking Crypt Keeper, man. Like, I did not watch the NFL draft coverage the last couple of years. ESPN draft coverage. I've gone NFL Network. And so I met my wife out at a bar for happy hour the other night, and on Thursday, and I look up, and there's Mel Kiper, just like, damn, you look fucking terrible. You do not need to be on TV anymore. It's absolutely ridiculous that people still care what the fuck Mel Kiper has to say. He was supposed to retire when somebody who I can't remember who it was, but he said like if it was Jimmy Clausen, who I wish he worked out. I love Jimmy Clausen, but he said if Jimmy Clausen doesn't play 10 years in the NFL, I'll be done with this. Well, Jimmy Clausen did not play 10 years in the NFL, and for some reason, Mel Kiper's still fucking going. Well, I mean, realistically, like, let's be honest and say like 100. Like, let's like scouting tape and all that stuff. I'll give him 100. Ooh, he's too gaunt to be Santa Claus. Like he looks like shit. I haven't. I haven't, but I don't know, man. Like he looks like. Do you remember he? What I'm trying to think of. No, it's not even that. I was trying to remember who I figured it out. In Christmas Vacation, the uncle with the cigar who lights everything on fire, who's got the toupee and shit. That's what Mel Kiper looks like at this point. Like. That's too much. Too much Mel. But he wasn't 25. No, he was probably 35, 40. America's team. So, you and I talked about this the other day. I was afraid that they were going to send Singleton down because of the money that's owed to Abreu. And I really didn't like the message that would send, simply because Singleton's been better than Abreu. And of anybody who deserves to be sent down, it was Jose Abreu. And lo and behold, Jose Abreu is the one who gets sent down. And thank God for that, as Singleton hit a 3-run homer tonight. But it's just ridiculous at this point how bad that he is. The fact that this man isn't even going to AAA, that he has to go back to the fucking spring training facility to figure out what is wrong, just shows you how much of a waste of money this is. And we'll get into that a little later, right? We'll talk more Jose Abreu a little later. We've got a special segment planned for him. I was really hopefully looking forward to this team turning a corner, right? We went to Mexico. As you can see, Viva Los Astros dominated in Mexico. And then this game, start down 3-0, but the fire comes back. He's 8 unanswered runs. You take an 8-3 lead. And then lo and behold, Hunter Brown gives up a 2-run homer. Then here comes Rafael Montero to save the day. He gives up a 3-run homer. It's going to kill my fantasy team, by the way. But it's just so frustrating, Scott, that it's just this team just one step forward, 2 step back. One step forward, 2 step back. Every time you feel like they're going to turn the corner and just rip off a stretch of wins, they take a step back. And it's just been very frustrating to this point. You came up with the best solution available. I agree with you 100% because this has got to be Dana Brown's team, and he's got to set the message. He's got to set the tone for this team. And I think there's no better way to ruin the culture than to send down a player who's performing better than the other guy. They both play the same position at the end of the day. They both play first base. One's hitting 250, one's hitting .078 or whatever it is at this point. You cannot send down the guy who's hitting 250. That would have been a travesty. So I give an early hat tip to Dana Brown for this. He's not going to get the big one. That's going to come later on. But I do give an early hat tip to Dana for like making the right baseball move. Maybe it wasn't the right financial move. Maybe Jim Crane doesn't love the fact that he's got $23 million sitting in the spring training working on his swing facility right now. But at the end of the day, Dana Brown made the best baseball move. He added a guy who already had a bases loaded hit with runners in scoring position, something Abreu has struggled with the whole time. He added a guy who gives you positional flexibility. He can play left, he can play center, he can play first base. He allows Jordan to DH, right? Strictly DH. We can now no longer have to have Jordan play left field unless you truly want to and you're trying to just load a lineup, or maybe Laperfito's hot, Singleton's hot, Jordan's hot, and you want Carati to catch and Yiner to DH. Like, I could see a game happening like that, but you've just given yourself so much more flexibility with this roster as opposed to having two guys who are strictly first basemen. Well, they had an extra roster spot for the international game. You get an extra player for that, so that's what that is. Cabbage was the Fromber got activated. One player had to go down. You had an extra player up, right? And I think also real quick too, you're forgetting France went down. Correct. Correct. He's got 38 starts in the minor leagues there. You're right. That money's gone no matter what. That is a guaranteed contract. The Astros are paying him that money regardless. So now at this point, do you try and get something out of it and take him down and take some hacks where you can get some video on his swing and line it up next to his swing in Chicago and say, look, your hand position was here. Now it's here. You're doing this. You're doing that. That's what they did with Pena over the offseason. Pena was working so hard to be quicker to the baseball that he essentially flattened his swing, and he lost his elevation and his ability to hit the ball in the air. And now look at him this year. He's hitting the ball as a lot higher launch angle. He's got the homer stroke back. He's hitting the ball hard, minus that strikeout. But still, Pena's playing better baseball. So the Astros have the technology. If we're going to go with like the $6 million man, or the $60 million man, like they have the capability, they have the technology to rebuild him. That's what they need to do, right? Like get in there, get in the lab, do some work, truly realize what's wrong, right? Because at the end of the day, this isn't just a slump. This isn't just like, man, it's not going my way. I've had some hard hit balls that haven't fallen. Like, no, man, like you're in a funk. You're not in a slump, you're in a funk, and your swing is not the same as it ever was. And so now's the time to go down, to do the work. And at the end of the day, if he doesn't do the work, that's on him. And he's stuck in Port St. Lucie. Enjoy it. Get your tan on. Go to the beach. I don't care. You're not affecting this ball club anymore, and we can move on. And so I absolutely commend Dana Brown for making what had to be a tough conversation, right? Like that had to be tough to bring a guy like Jose Abreu in and say, hey, like we can't just send you down. You have to accept this. Do you accept this, or do you want to get cut? Because the odds are, Scott, like no one's signing him. Like if we DFA'd him, he's not getting like an automatic phone call from somewhere else. Like they go off of what have you done for me lately? And last year he was bad, and this year he's worse. Like no one's gonna bring him in, even on a minor league deal, because why would you block valuable time for a minor league prospect to let Jose Abreu come strike out in AAA? We can do it, Scott. I'll give it to him. It is time for the horse's ass of the week, a.k.a. the Jose Abreu Memorial Trophy. All right, Scott. And before we settled on the name Horse's Ass, we had discussed lollygagger, right? Because there's a great scene in Bull Durham where the coach goes off. They lollygag around the infield. They lollygag around the outfield. What does that make them? Lollygaggers? Lollygaggers, right? And so that's what it is with Abreu. The offense has trickled onto the field, right? It is such in his head that you're right. He's dropping pop-ups. He's dropping throws to first that a major league first baseman should pick 10 out of 10 times. And he's just not able to make the plays and he's already defensive war wise cost his team realistically 4 runs, most likely more, but going by the sabermetric count, he's cost his team 4 runs. That's bad. That's really, really bad. And you mentioned Freddie Freeman. There's a difference with Freddie Freeman because he fucking mashes. Freddie Freeman hits above 300, and he hits a ton of doubles, and he drives in runs. Jose Abreu is hitting below 100 and costing you runs. So at the end of the day, whether it's the lollygagger or the horse's ass of the week, it belongs to Jose Abreu. Well, real quick, we did want to make a special. So I just wanted to say real quick, I'll take it. There's a lot of things that were said after it came out this weekend that Tank Dell was involved in a shooting. He had nothing to do with it. He was just wrong place, wrong time. He was clipped. It looks like he's going to be okay. And as it does with social media often, the narrative becomes, well, he shouldn't have been there. He had no business being there. Why is he out partying? Why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? He's, got so many other things going on. He shouldn't have been in that place to begin with. I'd like to take a minute to say he got shot trying to help people get out. He was hit because he, obviously, probably the fastest person there, Scott, probably could have just fucking bolted and got away no problem. Instead, he helped other people get out of there, and then when the bullets started flying, and he got hit. And thank God that he's okay, and thank God that most of the people who were hit are okay. But let's take a moment to recognize a good deed and not question his judgment, because his judgment from where I'm sitting was pretty damn good to help people escape safely from what was most likely an unbelievably terrifying situation. And you want to talk about like your fight or flight kicking in? That man, his first instinct was to help. And, Mr. Rogers a long time ago said, when bad things happen or, when there is a tragic event, look for the people helping. And at the end of the day, Tank Dell was one of those people helping. And, I'm proud that he's a Houston Texan. And I'm proud that he's an alumnus of, University of Houston. Scott, they don't even want you to have books, but they want you to have guns. What a world that we live in. Let's do a quick tip of the cap. I know there's been some things this week that have delighted you, so why don't you take a moment and tip your cap, Scott? I think you're definitely right. It takes a certain kind of person willing to accept that assignment, right? As you said, he could have said no. He has that right. He's a 5-year Major League veteran. And he could have just said, DFA me, I'll take my money and go wherever. But clearly the guy loves the game. Clearly he wants to help his teammates, right? Like, obviously he wants to find a way to fix his swing and get back up here and contribute to this team. And I do commend that, and I respect the tip of the cap. Kind of interesting. We give the guy the horse's ass of the week award, and then tip the cap to him in the same week. But hey, what are you gonna do? I'm gonna tip my cap this week. I guess I'll tip it to the city of San Antonio, or the Alamo in general. For those of you who don't live in Texas, our state loves its own history, and they give you a double dose of it in 4th grade and in 7th grade in school. And so Sawyer is finishing up her 4th grade year, and really loved the story of the Alamo and really got into that. And my wife and I took it as an opportunity to take her and let her see the Alamo and let her kind of experience that. And so being able to share that with her, as I'd like to consider myself a bit of a history buff, to being able to fill in some of the blanks that maybe weren't mentioned anywhere on those bulletin boards, such as Texas is the only state to fight twice to keep their slaves. So good job, Texas. But it's just cool to be able to share that stuff with your kids, to see her get that excited over touching the Alamo wall, like, ooh, we touched the actual wall, stuff like that. And then also, I was there during what they call Fiesta, which is a really cool, fun time in San Antonio. And even though I lived there for 3 years, I never really got to experience it, simply because I was, either a college student going home, or I was, waiting tables, and realistically just that was what I was doing to pay my bills. Didn't have time to go out to the Fiesta stuff. So being able to be there during that, it's a wonderful time to be in San Antonio. I will go to my grave. San Antonio is a fantastic vacation destination. It's a tough city to live in. It's kind of boring. But if you want to just go for a great weekend, San Antonio's a blast, man. I have, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, luckily they don't do that. No, they do teach real Texas history, somewhat, right? Like, I don't think the fourth graders know that, like, the reason Texas decided to fight is because Santa Anna tried to take their slaves away. Like, that's kind of like the big thing that, like, no one ever really mentions. And then also, Scott, there was a hilarious. I got to read this to you. I took a picture of it because it's the most awesome line you could ever see based on how we live in America today. Um, where is it? Mexican soldiers tried to halt illegal immigration from the United States. That was what was going on in the 1800s. It was absolutely hilarious to read that line of, like, the Mexican soldiers were trying to stop Americans from illegally immigrating into Mexico. Wow, have times changed. All right, Scott. Well, I think it's that time. People have offended us, and they need to be recognized as scumbags of the week. Scott, I'll let you take the lead off scumbag. That's tough, man. Like, not being able to read, being able to do stuff like that. That's just, like you said, it's not necessary to live, but it's necessary to enjoy life. So I am sorry to hear that, Scott. My scumbag this week, I don't know if we've made him a scumbag on this show. He has definitely been a scumbag in it. I think he's been a scumbag on this show. I'm going to preface this with, earlier last week, the Biden administration released some new laws through the FAA, holding the FAA and holding flights, holding airline companies liable for when they cancel flights. They've got to pay customers, right? You can't just leave people stranded and then say, hey, it's on you to figure this out. That seems like a pretty good law from where I'm standing. Seems like a really good law. Seems like something we should have had a long time ago, or even more, seems like something we shouldn't probably have to make a law for, but capitalism does what capitalism does. My scumbag put in legislation or try to enact legislation today to cancel that, to make sure that airlines don't have to pay people after they leave them stranded. That would be America's sweetheart, fucking Ted Cruz. This guy is scared to walk through an airport alone because he's such a giant piece of shit. And this is the stuff that he does. You literally are asking for like private entrances and private security to get through the airport because you're so afraid of the American people. This is why. And guess what, Scott? One of Ted Cruz's biggest donors during his last campaign and this campaign? American Airlines. What do you fucking know? You're a fucking scumbag, Ted Cruz. Yeah, iHeartRadio. Giant piece of shit. Scumbag doesn't really go far enough. And I'll just the French had it right, Scott. The French knew how to deal with shitty politicians at a level that we just for some reason can't get ourselves to. At some point we'll figure it out. Stop calling billionaires what they are. Start calling them oligarchs, and let's treat them how the French treated those people. Please, just say. Just say. Hey, only in America can we help you lose we can help you lose weight faster than anybody else. But now that we've made enough French Revolution guillotine jokes, I think that's going to do it for us here on the podcast. We appreciate everybody who joined us. I know we've had some technical difficulties last couple of weeks. Hopefully we were able to get those figured out here this week. And we will be back again next week. Hopefully the Astros can figure something out in that time. We'll see, but we'll be here regardless. We'll see you next week on Born on the Bayou Sports.